Sound Waves, written by Daniel Burnett, voiced by Ian Mortimer. Enjoy. His inbox pinged at him whilst he worked on a track. It was another offer, and a good one too. 3,000 Great British pounds to mix one song and send it back to them. Half paid now, and the other half when they received the mixed version of the track. That was an awful lot more than he would get to do a whole album normally. So Monty hurriedly replied with a resounding yes and tried to establish a time frame to agree upon. This wasn't answered at all. Instead, they sent the song straight over to be mastered along with a request of the sound engineer's payment details. Monty decided not to press for a time frame because the money would be of great help to bulking up his home studio. It took around 2 minutes for Monty's bank to inform him that his account had been credited £1,500. He was teeming with joy at this point, already planning on how to spend the money. He wanted to start work straight away, both out of intrigue at what the song could be like, and because if he'd do a great job and get it done quickly, the same person might come back to him with a more highly paid work. Monty went into his email and downloaded the song. He was a bit confused about the file size. It was huge. And he couldn't help but wonder if it contained a lot more layers to the mix than usual, which would explain the high payment.
This could take me a week,
he thought. But upon downloading it and importing it into his software, he found this to be untrue. Bizarrely, it was just the one layer, suggesting just the one instrument, but it was 73 minutes long. Monty scratched his head, completely puzzled. He started to worry that he had accepted money to a mixed piece of music that was not completed, or if they had accidentally sent him a track that had instruments missing. This would cause all sorts of problems, mainly having to send the money back until they had completed the song and it was actually ready to mix. Monty's finger anxiously hovered over the play button, preparing him for a disaster piece to come out of the headphones, and for 1,500 sorely needed notes to be deducted from his bank account in the form of a rage-inducing refund. He was ready, praying it would be an a cappella track or a story, or something that at least warranted 73 minutes. He hit play. The beginning sounded like frozen leaves were being crunched under light footfalls. This carried on for a couple of minutes before the slight creak of a door could be heard. Monty pressed the pause button on the playback for a moment and took his headphones and slid the door open. He couldn't tell if the distant crying he could hear was on the track or from one of his kids crying upstairs. There was silence. And so he slid the door shut and put the headphones back on. The next sound was a slightly more troubling one. Well, actually, it just wasn't the one sound. It was many, all somewhat quiet and distinct. It was a mixture of rustling, then the footsteps continued, then more rustling, then what sounded like metal hitting metal in the distance, and for a moment he thought he heard a child crying again, hence taking off his headphones the first time. The engineer sat somewhat confused as the sound was drowned out by an intermittent static. He took off the headphones a second time and played it through the speakers, hoping the added bass would highlight something the headphones were missing. Ever so quietly, Monty could hear the bass pick up a voice saying something. He couldn't make out what. He moved his ear closer to the speaker. All of a sudden there was a loud horn repeatingly quickly through the speaker, and the engineer threw himself back, nearly tripping over the chair behind him. He started cursing at the maker of this weird piece of jump scare crap. that had been sent to him. Monty went to turn off the track, but all of his equipment failed, leaving a black screen and still playing static sound. The clown-style horn seemed to have run away from the microphone recording this witchcraft, and the clash of metal on metal had returned to the forefront of the distant sounds. Monty then noticed the headphones he had placed on the desk. The nice warm studio very suddenly dropped in temperature, and his scared breathing suddenly took form in front of his face. The headphones were oozing what appeared to be dark red blood, and the engineer quickly took this as a sign to get himself and his children out of the house. Feeling his heart begin to panic, he clutched the sliding door handle and pulled hard, but the sliding door wouldn't move, and the back door wouldn't open either. He was locked in his conservatory-turned-home studio, with bleeding headphones and the unclear static voices emanating from his speakers. Monty again moved closer to the speakers to try and figure out what was being said. This time, preparing himself for a loud horn to sound. The static was starting to feel like sandpaper scraping the inside of his skull. Then it stopped. Silence returned to the room, and out of the speakers grew thin vines, like those you'd see on cherry tomatoes. Shaken, the sound technician just stood there, waiting for something else to happen. Without warning, the solid ground beneath him somehow allowed his feet to sink into it, trapping him in the concrete, vines coming up from the cracks in the floor and wrapping themselves around his feet. Monty screamed in pain as his arms and legs opened up on their own, revealing a network of vines following the course up the passageways of his arteries and veins. With blood seeping out from nearly everywhere, the engineer's skin started dropping off, like petals of a lily. With his last conscious moments, Monty watched while shrieking out in agony as his computer screen flickered on and off over and over. From what he could make out on the screen, his bulging eyes saw a small green tent, the last thing he would ever see, before his eyes popped and revealed the sprouting seeds in his skull. Would be a little girl getting out of her tent, completely surrounded by a large towering figure of billowing black smoke. His hearing was the last thing to go, proving this myth finally. And what he heard would have both troubled and baffled him forever. Were he unlucky enough to have somehow survived this horror? Raindrops started to drip from the leaves growing out of his skin as if they had been removed from the rainforest and placed under his skin to grow again. The last thing that this sound engineer would ever hear would be the words, "We must extend the forest." The engineer was found by his children in the morning when they came down for breakfast. Monty was a bloody mess, his scared and screaming face barely visible in the bark of a giant blood-stained oak he had so painfully become. Still growing its way through the ceiling, the small green tent remained on the computer screen in the background.
Hey guys and ghouls, thank you for watching the second episode, Soundwaves, of the EarthBurn series. If you're enjoying the series so far, please stick around because there is so much more storyline to come. Huge thank you, by the way, to Ian at Timeless Studios UK for both narrating and editing that sound, so thank you so much for that. If you would like to use his services, please get in contact with him. In the description are his details. As always, if you like what you hear, then please like and subscribe to this channel and enjoy.